All right, we are live. It's my pleasure to welcome Karen to this live stream. I met Karen, I think, a couple of years ago. We started
Yes.
off, and she was my client. And then she, in turn, went on to go through her certification, coaching certification, and she is now a coach. She's an internal coach and manager at Salesforce.
Yes.
Karen, I'm delighted to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Manoj. It is exciting to be here. It's wonderful to be here with you. Thank
Awesome.
you.
So let's kind of dive in. So,
Yeah.
just to give the context to people who are watching, Karen and I connect often, kind of to share notes and to kind of just connect with each other. And one of the things we experienced was a number of our clients were going through burnout,
Mm.
and so we got to talking, and we thought, hey, this is a good conversation. How about we do this and stream it to people so that those of us who need that kind of additional perspective can benefit from it. So
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
what it is. So let's start with it. I would like to start off with the definition of burnout, because sometimes we kind of confuse burnout with depression, or we can tend to put it like I'm overwhelmed. So Karen, what do you think is burnout?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was feeling a little bit of burnout a few months ago, as a matter of fact. And, what I realized, if I look back over the past few years, we've gone from, pandemic to, reshuffling in the technology sector, economic stress for people. A lot of people are going through layoffs. It's a lot of disruption. So for me, it was the feeling of being overwhelmed, not being able to catch my breath, going from crisis to crisis to crisis, and I wasn't having any more fun. I'm starting
Yeah,
to feel a little cranky, right?
yeah,
My sleep was getting disturbed. I was feeling on edge. I was feeling like I couldn't quite keep up enough, and it was pretty overwhelming.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. So overwhelm is a symptom of burnout,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
we can get overwhelmed, and sometimes life can come in the way.
Sure.
But one of the things I noticed when people are burnt out is this loss of control. Uh,
Oh,
like I
yeah.
remember, I actually went to CTI, my coaching alma mater, when I was in the midst of
Mhm.
burnout, because I
Oh, yeah.
felt very little control. I was getting pulled into meetings. I was
Yep.
getting pulled into, I was taking on work which I couldn't say no to. So it was not so much just the physical and mental toll; it was the loss of control. What do you think, Karen?
That, yeah, and I'm going to add on to that. It things started feeling meaningless to me. Like, what am I doing all this for? Like, it didn't, and I felt a loss of purpose and focus, and that led to kind of spiraled into feeling like a failure. I wasn't good at this anymore. I
Yeah,
don't know what I'm doing. It was a pretty negative spiral, and it showed up for me, kind of physically. It was disturbing my sleep. My nutrition was off. I wasn't exercising anymore, wasn't taking care of myself, which just bled into almost every aspect of my life. I just didn't have any energy left over at the end of the day.
yeah, and what you're saying is so important, because when this happened, it can quickly kind of spiral into our personal
Oh,
life,
yeah.
right? It's like suddenly, the relationships with even our close ones, we don't have time for our
Yep.
kids, or for our, our better half, or friends around us, the social life, the health
Yeah.
routine, everything kind of gets disrupted.
It really can be. Yeah. And that's where I think it can get really dangerous, and it can really start affecting your larger quality of life kinds of markers and things that are important to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'm noticing is this also seems to affect high performers, because
Mm.
again, high performers have this, call it artificial targets, right? They're like, I have taken on these 25 tasks and I have to complete them today no matter what. And
Yeah. These
that
impossible standards. Yeah.
impossible standards, and then they can go into self-judgment zone, and loss of self-esteem and imposter syndrome and all of that kind of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing that struck me was, the most important piece around burnout is, I feel, the lack of a kind of identifying that, hey, I'm in the midst of burnout, because
Hmm.
a lot of people are like, what, I have too much on my plate, I don't have a lot of control, but I have to finish it. So they
Yes.
start kind of getting into this kind of a tunnel effect of, no matter what, I have to finish, no matter what, I have to finish, I'm so tired, I'm exhausted, but I have to finish. And I think that's dangerous, because then they just don't have a full stop. Like there's no, this is it, no more, is something that people don't seem to have a sense of what that is.
Well, it sets up a false narrative too, I think, in people's heads because they're focusing on the wrong things. There's this belief that if you finish the work, you will get relief at the end of it, and there's a lack of understanding that you're in the middle of a cycle.
Yeah.
There's this cycle. It's a burnout cycle, and so you're not addressing the root cause. You're just chasing symptoms, which just leads you back on that treadmill,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And also the other piece which I've noticed is people also, I think it also becomes a little addictive. I remember
Mm-hmm.
14, 16 hours a day, and sometimes you almost subconsciously crave it, right?
Yeah.
Even though your body is telling you stop, your kind of energy is telling you to stop, you are kind of, it becomes a routine of sorts.
Well, that I think, and I've been in those modes too. It's where I'm overriding my body's wisdom or my inner wisdom, right? There's even a part of my inner intelligence that knows what proper scoping of work looks like, but I will intentionally override it for a feeling because I think I'm going to get relief from the stress that I'm
Exactly.
feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I want to touch upon something which I think, I'm sure, I think a lot of men go through this, women can also go through this. I think men sometimes struggle to identify and express their feelings.
Mm,
Uh, from where I grew up, I grew up in India, and as a man, you're supposed to be the provider. You're supposed to, be in control. You're not supposed to really, show vulnerability, right? So
mhm.
the fact that you are stressed, and I think men struggle to sometimes communicate this at work.
I think there's a lot of truth to that culturally, but I'm going to challenge you and tell you that I don't think you've got a corner on that. I was a single parent for 20 years, and so I put a lot of pressure on myself to provide. And there were a lot of years, and my children were younger, and I was the sole financial provider for my family. That I didn't want to take the time to stop to
Yes,
feel I had to push through and
yes.
get it done and show up for other people. So I think it's kind of a human thing
Hmm.
that we can, for whatever reasons, put ourselves on the back burner in order to override and push through for another objective.
Yeah, beautiful. And I want to kind of double click on that, because you're so focused on, I need to get to the other end. You
Mhm.
don't really take the time to feel your feelings.
No,
And that's what adds to the burnout.
absolutely.
Uh, I have found that in some of the calls, when I notice that my clients are overwhelmed or stressed, sometimes I'll just pause. I'll have them just breathe, like just there's nothing to do, just stay here. And very often they'll be able to tap into some emotion that they have repressed. Sometimes I've noticed tears. Sometimes there's some kind of there's something that happens, because when we are burnt out, we are so focused on, I need to get to the other end, that we store all of these things in our body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will tell you also that I've seen some cases with some of my clients and my own personal experience, having just gone through this, that in my case, I was using work. I was actually over indexing on work in a way to avoid dealing with some feelings in my personal life. During the pandemic is when my son went to college, and we did not have a traditional empty nest, situation because he was back and forth from school with the pandemic. But when he finally left this year, I minimized the feelings that were lurking below the surface in adjusting to this new role in my life.
Yeah,
Without even realizing it, I was putting more emphasis on work to avoid. And
yeah,
I think there may be some of that that goes on with people too. Work can be a place where we get a lot of positive
yeah,
affirmations and reinforcements, and that in itself becomes a way to, in a socially acceptable way, avoid our own personal feelings and situations that we need to deal with.
Absolutely. And I think there's this sense of approval that people
Yes.
work. Uh, Sometimes when I ask my clients, okay, how many things do you have to do in the week? And they say, I've got 20 things. And I ask them, what will happen if you don't finish some of them? And many of them can't even imagine what that looks like, because they go like, oh my God, I can't imagine not doing that. So that's the amount of expectations and stress that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's also an element of boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we are in a space and time where there's a lot of, I call it systemic stress, right?
Yeah, oh,
Uh,
yeah.
there's a lot of, you saw that a lot of layoffs. A lot of companies are, in a sense, struggling. And so
Yeah.
that would be the sense of, what, I need to do whatever I need to do to protect my job.
Exactly. There's some fear of economic instability that can be underneath it all. There can be some fear about implications for your family or your livelihood. So I think instead of dealing with the fears and addressing that head on and feeling the fear, we instead divert our attention and go back to the work and the task at hand. Something that you said a moment ago, though, I want to kind of double down on that. When you're talking about where we don't allow space in our world, where we're kind of caught up in this,
Yeah,
there's no space for celebration either,
yeah.
and that's something you used to remind me of an awful lot in our coaching sessions is how am I going to celebrate? How am I recognizing the work that I'm doing? So when I'm on that treadmill of just chasing the next task and plowing through overwhelm, I'm not recognizing the work that I'm doing and celebrating that and feeling good about that in the moment. There's no room for that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, you're touching upon such a huge reason why people, often end up keep going. I remember the
Yes.
time when I went to the first set of coaching, classes. I
Yeah.
was burnt out. I was stressed. I was beating myself up, and I realized that through the coaching, I realized, okay, I am craving approval from my leaders, and
Mm-hmm.
at the heart of it, at the root of it, I was not approving myself. There
Exactly.
was a lack of self-esteem. There was a lack of, only if I, and there's also the conditioning, right? Only if you accomplish certain things
Right.
can you get the approval. And a lot of times, the corporate space also kind of, you know conforms to that. Like, you achieve something massive, you get to celebrate.
It
You don't really
reinforces
celebrate
it.
the milestones along the journey, right? you
Right.
don't, you don't go out for dinner. You don't really do any of that.
Right.
It's always like, hey, we've got this major release, major product launch. Only after that can we breathe, and I think that's taking a toll on people.
Absolutely. And people don't recognize the value of those little recognitions and that those inner celebrations we can give ourselves. And they don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be huge. They don't even have to be public. But those are little ways where you can refill the well, right? If I
Mhm.
recognize myself and give a little back to myself, that can be a place where I can pause, take an assessment, and have the energy to move forward.
Beautiful. And Karen, you just touched upon something, and I think we're kind of going towards the how
Yeah.
to recover from the burnout space.
Yeah.
And I was reading this fascinating book. It's called the Five Love Languages. I mean, it's written by Gary,
Mm-hmm.
and I was reading a version called the Five Love Languages of Children. And in that, there's this quote that says, anytime your children are cranky, or they're kind of throwing tantrum, it means, no matter what the cause, it means their emotional love tank is empty. So
Yeah.
fill up their emotional love tank. And I'm bringing that up to say that as adults, we are just like children. When we are burnt out, we want to be seen. We want to be, heard,
Oh,
appreciated,
yeah.
recognized. We want to be loved. Our emotional tanks need to be filled up.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, Manoj, when I was feeling burned out just 6 weeks ago, it was just sick. I have in 6 weeks, I've completely been able to reverse my situation with it. And it was by kind of refilling the right tank. So I was trying to overfill my work tank, but what was actually depleted was my personal emotional tank, really dealing with my home life and my role as a person. And so when I diverted my attention from the work and started addressing my needs on the personal side, all of a sudden I didn't feel burned out anymore because I wasn't over indexing on work.
Yeah,
And so refilling that well gave me the energy to perform better at work, feel less stress, and have energy left over at the end of the day for other parts of my life. And I think I think what's really important for people is to really identify what part of their emotional life needs to be addressed or what value they need to honor a little bit more. What dreams are they holding back, and double down on creating some space for those things. And then you get in better balance.
totally. And I think that's where it would help for people to have a coach, because
Oh my gosh. Yes.
you need somebody to kind of point out what's going on. We can. I like to think that we are never quite objective with ourselves, right? There's a lot of, the way we look at ourselves is kind of also a narrative that we have created. So if you are somebody who's like, you know what, I'm kind of Superman. I'm not supposed to not finish this. uh,
Mm.
and that's kind of almost like a little bit toxic, because it comes in the way of you kind of filling up your love tank and really being at peace. And I think having a sense of control and getting to a peaceful state, that alone can significantly reduce burnout.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I can't see myself objectively. I don't think that any of us can really see ourselves truly objectively. And it was very helpful for me to reach out to somebody when I recognized I'm in the spiral. I don't know how to get out of it, right? And I hear this from my clients. I'm in a spiral. Can you help me and help me figure out what exactly it is where I need to get some clarity.
Absolutely.
They don't have to be even long session. I was able to coach someone just yesterday in a 5-minute session, and it completely shifted something that had been keeping them up for several weeks.
Yeah,
So it can just be allowing the space for that kind of work to happen.
beautiful. And this is where I think people need to start embracing vulnerability.
Yes.
And either you want to, get hold of a coach who will have your back, or you need to have people in your life or even at your work who have your back. I
Yeah.
think in these moments when we are burnt out and we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable, like that can really have a crippling effect, because then you're kind of riding blind, right?
Well, I think burnout, along with having us chase the tasks and chase the feelings, also kind of brings up a shift in our perception, where we think that we're the only ones feeling it. Everybody's going to think we're a failure,
Yeah,
and nobody else is going through this. This is something I'm doing wrong, right? That's kind of the story I'm telling myself in that burnout state. So it almost makes it even more difficult to reach out for help.
yeah,
But I think if you can, it takes a little bit of trust. If you've got someone that you trust in your life, either a coach, a friend, a mentor at work, that can be a place where you can kind of tell the truth of I'm suffering a little bit here. I'm
yeah,
feeling overwhelmed. I'm
yeah.
feeling a little burned out. I'm not having fun, and I can't see my way out of this right now.
And it's when I used to work in India, I had a really tough boss, and I
Yeah.
was always swamped in work. And I had this one friend to whom I could go and just
Mm.
open up, and she would just listen. She was the best listener in the world. Remains, she's a very dear friend, and just 10-15 minutes of just dumping
Yes.
can have an impact, can have, and I think we don't, the more we hold on to it, that's what causes stress. So having that emotional support in your life, vulnerability, I think these two kind of go hand in hand. I would say
I
that's the first step.
I think it's critical, and I think it's also when you're starting to move up the food chain, in an organization, and you start reaching those higher executive levels, it can get a little lonelier, right?
Yeah,
It can be for some people a place where they don't feel they have the space or the ability to be vulnerable. And I think that's a hard place to be. And that's why one of the reasons why executive coaching has become as necessary and predominant as it has today.
Totally. And I think, but you know what? We have still just scratched the surface, right? If you look at the
Yeah.
number of companies, if you look at the number of people who understand what coaching is, who understand the value of coaching, it's still, I think we are still scratching the surface. And for a lot of people, and this is where I think there's also a need for um, more human leadership, right? Like
Yes.
recognizing, looking at people and having the ability to kind of deepen their own emotional self-awareness and kind of tuning into others' emotional well-being, because I think that's what is coming in the way. Because and counterintuitively, I've also seen some of my other clients who are working 16 hours, but they love it. They have a supportive boss. They still feel in control. If they have to push back, they still feel like if they have to voice certain things out, they feel they can voice it out. So it's
Right.
never just the work alone
Right.
that,
Right.
that
Right.
having that kind of
Absolutely.
relationship.
I think it's your experience within the container that you're working in, right? And I think it's when you think about burnout and what it does to people and how they start, how it alters your expectations for yourself and those around you, how impactful it is to have executives and leaders in organizations who are dealing in healthy manners with burnouts. I'm sure you are familiar. Sounds like you've had an experience or two with leaders who were burned out. And what was the impact on your organization?
Yeah, I mean the impact is negative, right? Because
Exactly.
if you are feeling constrained and feeling like you can't voice it out, now what happens is, emotions kind of have a way of getting out. Either it
Right.
comes out consciously or it comes out in a very unconscious way.
Right.
And I have experienced that when I went through burnout. When I did, I used to come back and I just wanted to binge watch something. I want to binge watch Netflix.
Right.
I don't really want to have a conversation with my wife, or I don't want to talk about something really meaningful because I'm exhausted, and I just
Right.
want to watch something, and I'll have like a chips packet in my hand. And it took me. I had to really kind of face the pain of it in order to recover from it. And the key to recovery
Absolutely.
is always emotional support, and also putting in place some systems. So let's talk about that. What are
Yes.
some so it's not quite, a lot of people think that the way to get out of burnout is have one conversation, let people know, tell them I can't take this thing. But
Right.
it has a way of repeating. Life has a way of repeating the same issues till you kind of put a fix to it, right? What are some systems that you have observed you and your clients kind of put in place to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really is recognizing that the burnout is not truly about the number of hours you're working or how much is on your plate, right? Because people are always going to have, if you're working, you're going to have to always contend with those things. It really has to do with what's going on below the surface. So
Mhm.
I get curious about, well, is there something that you're not attending to, either in your personal life or in your work life, that's really important to you?
Yeah.
And it's kind of lurking in the back of your mind as sort of a low drum beat of, I've got to get this done, I've got to get this done. If only I had time, I would take that walk, attend my kids thing, take on this project that's truly meaningful. Whatever those things are, it's really spending the time to uncover what you need to truly address.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of step one.
Yeah, really kind
What
of.
about you?
I agree. I think that's first step one, kind of, because we wear so many different hats.
Mm-hmm.
We are parents, and we are, spouses, and we are friends, and we are volunteers, and we are leaders, and we
Sure.
wear so many different hats. And I think a lot of times it kind of, you almost just focus on this one hat, which is, hey, I have to this work, I have to finish this work,
Right.
and the ability to kind of ask yourself, introspect on which hat is most important right now,
Yes.
and then kind of calibrating expectations accordingly, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I also feel, one skill for people to learn, especially mid managers who go through this, and also some senior leaders, is they are not, they are too agreeable. I tell people, like, sometimes you need to be disagreeable, especially when you're dealing with
Yes,
executive leadership. You need to be able to be forceful and say, this can't be done. Like, no, I won't be able
exactly.
to do it. And because it's the need for approval that people end up saying no, more and more. So I have found that a good system to build is actually kind of develop the courage to be disagreeable.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I work a lot with clients on is, all right, so say they identify a place in their life where they want to spend more time, they're not attending to it. They want to say yes to something. You also have to decide, what are you going to say no to in
Mm.
order to let that happen? And what will that mean? How will it feel if you say no? What are you risking? And it takes sometimes some role playing and like straight up practice in learning how to say no and getting comfortable with that.
Yep, yep. And the other piece is, of course, uh, learning to really trust and delegate, right? I
Yes,
still feel people, and this is the catch 22. I think till at least if you are in any knowledge industry, till the time you become a senior manager or a director, almost, it's your expertise, your skills, what you bring to the table. It's the whole focus is you, and
sure.
then you need to now learn to manage your team. You need to kind of help them take on more. You need to step back, and that can be hard for a lot of people. I was talking to a client the other day, and he has 18 people reporting into him. I'm like, wow, how many calls do you have? And he's like, I talk to them every week. I'm like, how many hours do you work? And that's the reason. Sometimes it's the sense of, you are too involved. You are kind of
Right,
too much in the weeds to
right.
realize that, there are ways in which you can put some systems in place. It comes down to trusting people more. And that can be a little scary because for a lot of people, nobody can quite do things the way we do it, right? The kind of standard we do it.
I think also you're making me think about this. It's redefining what success is in your new role as a manager or an upper level manager, right? So success is not necessarily the work product. So my work stream at Salesforce is documentation. So I no longer focus on the documentation products. I trust my team to deliver that excellence. What my definition of success now is, how autonomous are they? Am I growing leaders? Are they able to troubleshoot and handle, come up with their own strategies? So my focus on what is successful for me has shifted as I've embraced different roles.
Karen, we could do a whole another live on what success looks like. It's that big of
Yes.
a topic. It's that big of a topic. And one of the things I have realized, and this is personally as a kind of solopreneur coach looking to build my business, one of the things I'm learning is to start looking at what has been done and not what is
Mhm.
pending. And I think we are almost
Yes.
like hardwired. Like, I'm an engineer who, I
Right.
did an MBA. We are always focused on the gap. We are always focused on the
Yes.
lack. Oh, I did 8 things, but I didn't do these 3 things. And that is what leads to a, I would say, lack of approving oneself.
Yeah. And that energy deficit, if you're always pushing forward, it's that pause and that celebration and recognition of what you did accomplish.
Yeah, and the other thing I notice when in especially in the early calls I have with some new clients is when I acknowledge them, when I say, what,
Hmm.
looking at what you have accomplished, it sounds like you have done a lot of really good things, and it's so hard for them to see that, and they're always like brush it off. No, you know what? I've got a long way to go.
Right.
That was not a big deal. So people deflect appreciation.
Yes.
They deflect kind of acknowledging what they have, and I think that's at the heart of seeking approval outside, going on this treadmill of what I want accomplishment from others.
Yes.
And I think that also contributes, because if you have a kind of a solid sense of self, uh,
Hmm.
then you can kind of design the amount of work you take, or at least kind of design a system in place. So I think a lot of it begins with the mindset.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And I think culturally, and, we're always looking for, what have you done for me lately? Or what, it's very very accomplishment focused. And again, shifting that mindset a little bit to incorporate more self acknowledgement, I think is key.
Beautiful. So, Karen, we are nearing the end of the live. I would love to, for the viewers, how about we design a few call to action for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one is I would ask, people who may be listening, how do you recognize if you're burning out? And what would be the next step, Manoj?
Yeah, I would say get at least one person in your life with whom you can be completely authentic and vulnerable. No matter what you're going through, it could be in
Yeah.
your personal life, professional life, social life. See if you can find somebody in your life with whom you can be fully yourself without any judgment from the other side. And if
Fantastic.
you can't find that, find a coach. You will notice that as coaches, we that is why we are coaches. We love to not judge. So
Absolutely.
sign up for a coaching conversation. Allow yourself to be vulnerable, and I think that can be the next step. So my challenge to everybody watching: have that conversation.
Yes. I love it. Thank you, Manoj. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Karen. And let's send some good energy. This is a
Yes.
battle, and what I long for is a world which is more self-aware, more conscious, and more compassionate towards self,
Mm,
so that we can kind of deal with this burnout, which is kind of becoming an epidemic.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Awesome. It's great to talk to you, Karen.
Always great to talk to you too. Thank you so much.
All right.